Hey, welcome back to Adult Brain. I'm Graham, one of the narrators. This is an experimental live read of Ancient America by Baldwin from 1871. Pretty interesting book. We are in chapter 10 right now, which is Ancient Peru, the Spanish hunt for Peru, the ruins near Lake Titicaca. That'll be interesting to see what they say of that in the 1800s and other ruins in Peru. And we probably won't get through the whole chapter today. Finish it off tomorrow. And then we'll get into Peruvian ancient history and then the conclusion. So we're almost towards the end. You can go back to our live tab and see the first 9 chapters, which we're talking about the Mound Builders, Mexico and Central America, the Yucatan, the antiquity of the ruins, whence came this civilization, and all that stuff. There's some interesting sketches in here from Baldwin going way back. So this is raw and rough. I'm going to share my screen. This is how we do it. We are humans here. This is how I record the stuff. I mean, I would use full screens and when I don't do it live. So this is kind of like a Mickey Mouse version of how I do it. But let's just do a test here. Check to make sure it works. I'm going to scroll through this PDF and we'll jump into it. Chapter 10, Ancient Peru. The ruins of ancient Peru are found chiefly on the elevated tablelands of the Andes between Quito and Lake Titicaca, but they can be traced 500 miles farther south to Chile and throughout the region connecting these high plateaus with the Pacific coast. The great district to which they belong extends north and south about 2,000 miles. When the marauding Spaniards arrived in the country, this whole region was a seat of a populous and prosperous empire, complete in its civil organization, supported by an efficient system of industry, and presenting a very notable development of some of the more important arts of civilized life. These ruins differ from those in Mexico and Central America. No inscriptions are found in Peru. There is no longer a marvelous abundance of decorations. Nothing is seen like the monoliths of Copan or the bas reliefs of Palenque. The method of building is different. The Peruvian temples were not high truncated pyramids, and the great edifices were not erected on pyramidal foundations. The Peruvian ruins show us remains of cities, temples, palaces, other edifices of various kinds, fortresses, aqueducts, one of them 450 miles long, great roads extending through the whole length of the empire, and terraces on the sides of mountains. For all these constructions, the builders used cut stone laid in mortar or cement, and their work was done admirably. But it is everywhere seen that I better redo that. I'm just going to pull that down a little bit. I'll try not to snort and cough too much, but it starts to get loosened up and it starts to come out eventually. Check. Check. For all these constructions, the builders used cut stone laid in mortar or cement, and their work was done admirably. But it is everywhere seen that the masonry, although sometimes ornamented, was generally plain in style and always massive. The antiquities in this region have not been as much explored and described as those north of the isthmus, but their general character is known, and particular descriptions of some of them have been published. The Spanish hunt for Peru. The Spanish conquest of Peru furnishes one of the most remarkable chapters in the history of audacious villainy. It was the work of successful buccaneers as unscrupulous as any crew of pirates that ever robbed and murdered on the ocean. After their settlements began on the islands and Atlantic coast, rumors came to them of a wonderful country somewhere at a distance in the west. They knew nothing of another ocean between them and the Indies. The western side of the continent was a veiled land of mystery, but the rumors, constantly repeated, assured them that there was a country in that unknown region where gold was more abundant than iron among themselves. Their strongest passions were moved: greed for the precious metals and thirst for adventures. Balboa was hunting for Peru when he discovered the Pacific about 1511 AD. He was guided across the isthmus by a young native chief who told him of that ocean, saying it was the best way to the country where all the common household utensils were made of gold. At the Bay of Panama, Balboa heard more of Peru and went down the this typewriter, the typewriter that they used back then, had a broken C because there's E's everywhere the C's should be. At the Bay of Panama, Balboa heard more of Peru and went down the coast to find it, but did not go south much beyond the 8th degree of the north latitude. In his company of adventurers at this time was Francisco Pizarro, by whom Peru was found, subjugated, robbed, and ruined some 15 or 20 years later. Balboa was superseded by Pedrarius, another greedy adventurer whose jealousy arrested his operations and finally put him to death. The town of Panama was founded in 1519 by this Pedrarius. The town of Panama. Do that again. The town of Panama was founded in 1519 by this Pedrarius, chiefly as a point on the Pacific from which he could seek and attack Peru. Under his direction in 1522, the search was attempted by Pascal and de Goya. Let me redo that quickly. Under his direction in 1522, the search was attempted by Pascal de Andagoya, but he failed to get down the coast beyond the limit of Balboa's exploration. Meanwhile, clearer and more abundant reports of the rich and marvelous nation to be found somewhere below that point were circulated among the Spaniards, and their eagerness to reach it became intense. In 1524, 3 men could have been seen in Panama, busily engaged, preparing another expedition to go in search of the Golden Country. These were Francisco Pizarro, a bold and capable adventurer who could neither read nor write; Diego del Magro, an impressive, passionate, reckless soldier of fortune; and Hernando de Luque, a Spanish ecclesiastic, vicar of Panama, and a man well acquainted with the world and skilled in reading character, acting at this time, it is said, for another person who kept out of view. They had formed an alliance to discover and rob Peru. Luque would furnish most of the funds and wait in Panama for the others to do the work. Pizarro would be commander-in-chief. The vessels used would necessarily be such as could be built at Panama and therefore not very efficient. Pizarro went down the coast, landing from time to time to explore and rob villages, until he reached about the 4th degree of north latitude, where he was obliged to return for supplies and repairs. It became necessary to reconstruct the contract and allow Pedrarius an interest in it. On the next voyage, one of the vessels went half a degree south of the equator and encountered a vessel like a European caravel, which was in fact a Peruvian balsa, loaded with merchandise, vases, mirrors of burnished silver, and curious fabrics of cotton and woolen. It became again indispensable to send back to Panama for supplies and repairs, and Pizarro was doomed to wait for them 7 months on an island. He next excuse me. He next visited Tumbes in Peru and went to the 9th degree of south latitude. But he was obliged to visit Spain to get necessary aid before he could attempt anything more, and it was not until the year 1531 that the conquest of Peru was actually undertaken. In 1531, Pizarro finally entered Tumbes with his buccaneers and marched into the country, sending word to the Inca that he came to aid him against his enemies. There had been a civil war in the country, which had been divided by the great Inca, Huayna Capac, the conqueror of Quito, between his 2 sons, Huáscar and Atahualpa. The conqueror of Quito, between his 2 sons, I'm going to just double check those pronunciations here quickly. I kind of missed them. I'm going to go back to the beginning of that sentence there, right here. Huanya Capic, the conqueror of Quito. Let me just double check. Kind of had these ready to go, but when it's time, Wasker is one, and Wina Capic, Huascar, and Atalupa. What is that one? It's not Atahualpa. Let's see where I can come back to here. Oh, that's not going to work. All right, so let me see here. There had been a civil war in the country which has been divided by the great Inca, Huanya Capic, Huascar, Atahualpa. There had been a civil war in the country which had been divided by the great Inca, Huanya Capac, the conqueror of Quito, between his two sons, Huascar and Atahualpa. And Huascar had been defeated and thrown into prison and finally put to death. I'm just going to tighten that up a little bit. I don't usually do that, but I think that's fine. Let's see, where am I? Cajamalca, Pizarro, Cajamalca. Let me just double check that. Cajamarca. Yeah, I don't like that. They're giving me the wrong. My assistant is giving me the wrong. So it's going to be Cajamalca. Put to death. At a city called Cajamalca, Pizarro contrived by means of the most atrocious treachery to seize the Inca and massacre some 10,000 of the principal Peruvians who came to his camp unarmed on a friendly visit. This threw the whole empire into confusion and made the conquest easy. The Inca filled a room with gold as the price of his ransom. The Spaniards took the gold, broke their promise, and put him to death. The ruins near Lake Titicaca. It is now agreed that the Peruvian antiquities represent two distinct periods in the ancient history of the country, one being much older than the other. Mr. Prescott accepts and repeats the opinion that there existed in the country a race advanced in civilization before the time of the Incas, and that the ruins on the shores of Lake Titicaca are older than the reign of the first Inca. In the work of Rivero and Von Chitty, it is stated that a critical examination of the monuments indicates two very different epochs in Peruvian art, at least so far as concerns architecture, one before and the other after the arrival of the first Inca. Among the ruins which belong to the older civilization are those at Lake Titicaca, Old Huanuco. Among the ruins. Let me redo that one quickly. Huanuco, Tiwanaku. Huanuco. Let me just double check that. Huanuco. Granchimo. Cajamarca. Atahualpa. Maybe I didn't look at that one. Okay, Huanuco. Oh, now I've got to go back. Okay. The first Inca. Okay, let's just give that a shot here. Oh, there I am. I was looking too further up the page. Okay, let's scroll up while I got a chance here. Check the record level, make sure it's not slipping down below 44. Among the ruins which belong to the older civilization are those at Lake Titicaca, Old Huanuco, Tiahuanaco. Among the ruins which belong to the older civilization are those at Lake Titicaca, Old Huanuco, Tiahuanacu, and Grand Chimu, and it probably originated the roads and aqueducts. At Cusco and other places are remains of buildings which represent the later time. But Cusco of the Incas appears to have been occupied, the site of. Interesting. Yeah, they're talking about the difference in these things way back then in the 1800s. It's fascinating. Building upon building. Check, check. But Cusco of the Incas appears to have occupied the site of a ruined city of the older period. Figure 51 gives a view of the ancient Peruvian masonry. Montesinos supposes the name of Cusco was derived from Cosca, a Peruvian word signifying to level or form heaps of earth. From heaps of. Is that really supposed to be from, or is that Montesino? Is that a spelling mistake there? Montesinos. Montesinos supposes the name of Cusco was derived from Cosca, a Peruvian word signifying to level, or from heaps of earth called coscos, which abounded there. It's interesting that heaps of earth. So while I'm stopped here, there is figure 51, ancient Peruvian masonry. Wow, there's those polygonal blocks that are all fit together. This is there's a guy in the sketch there for scale, and it looks like they were sketching this stuff back in 1871, and they realized this was older still than the stuff that was built upon it. Thanks, Sunny D. Appreciate that. Where was I? Which abounded there. Let's go. So that's a pretty cool picture. In his account of the previous times, there is mention that an old city built there was in ruins. Perhaps the first Inca found on its site nothing but coscos, or heaps of ruins. At Lake Titicaca, some of the more important remains are on the islands. On Titicaca Island are the ruins of a great edifice described as a palace or temple. Remains of other structures exist, but their ruins are old, much older than the time of the Incas. Figures 52 and 53 represent different ruins on the island of Titicaca. Okay, I'm going to stop and just shift this PDF over, and I'll have to expand it, and then I'm going to have to recenter it all because unfortunately it doesn't do that. So here's figure 42, Casa Colorado. Thought there was another one right there too. Look at that one, the Great Stone Ring. Cool. All right, and then I will just pop this back to where it should be. But now I have to recenter this stupid thing. Let's see if that goes back to normal. What the? Why did it jump back to page 2? Oh boy. Okay, this is a problem with moving this PDF around. That's not good. Okay, I'm just going to find my spot again here. I've lost my place. Now, it looks like there's some good pictures in this chapter. Okay, here we are. So, okay, what am I going to do about this? Should I have this in the background? Why don't we try this for this little stretch of through this little stretch of them all. I'll try to do it. Shit, I forgot to go backwards. I got to go back to the other. There we go. Did that pop back to page 111 again? What? Okay, so I'm gonna spread this out, and I'm gonna really try to do this because there's these cool pictures in here. So I want to show on the island of Titicaca. I'm gonna just squeeze this audio thing right down to almost nothing here. As long as I can see that record level up there. Lake Titicaca. Well, why is this? What is going on with this guy? Got to go all the way around the circle here. Sorry about this. Don't bring me back to 142. Unbelievable. I seriously don't know why this PDF that's $25 a month or $30 a month makes me question sometimes this Adobe bullshit. All right, so let's get back to where we were, and let's hope that we can just there we go. But now it's still not the right way. Okay, go back. I just want to be able to read you. And it went back to 142 again. I don't know why, but let's just see here. So this is not very professional, but whatever. This is why it's an experiment, and I'm trying to put these pictures on the screen. But okay, one more switch, and it should be fine. There we go. Now I was at the spot. I thought I was at the spot right there. Okay, so did we see that then? The ruins of the temple. Now I'm frustrated with why it's coming back to 142 again. So I can't even just move it to the right because it's going to jump backwards to that. So let's try this again here. There's the ruins of the temple. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to scroll this way because there's probably a bunch of them that are this way. Ruins of temple on the island of Titicaca. This is that sketch from the 1800s. That's pretty cool. And then if I go around the horn, what is up with page 142? Seriously, what is going on here? I can't even just adjust this without it popping back there. Go around the horn with this guy, and then it jumps back again. This is insanity. I'm sure there's something with 142, but I don't have the patience to look for that right now. And they, it would have been nice if they look like they're pointing the same way. So how come when I scrolled down, it was the opposite? So here's the ruins on Titicaca Island there. This is the sketch from the 1800s. Kind of interesting. And is there anything on this page? That's just a blank page. Here's the ruins on the island of Koti. Monolithic gateway at Tiwanaku. Interesting that's the sketch. We've seen that one a lot. If I do this one more time, will it pop me back to one? Yeah. There's the lookout at Old Huanaku. Wow, that's the sketch of that gateway. That's pretty cool. Okay, I think I'm just gonna have to look at that. It just pulls it way out into. Oh, that's the one I was trying to look at. So that's the remains of fortress walls at Cusco. All right, so let's just now that we've seen all those, we can just motor on and read on. Let's find out where I was at. Was I this far down? Okay, I'm gonna have to do this though. Once, twice. 142. I think this will be it. Do I have to do? Oh, is it doing a page at a time? Is that what it's doing? Oh my God. Maybe because the PDF is different at 142, it's bouncing back to where it's not page by page, or something like that. Anyways, gotta have fun with this, I guess. So there, I still can't read that properly. So I'm going to do one more. There we go. Okay, Lake Titicaca represents there. Okay, there we go. So here we are. Can move forward. Stone, the doorways being narrower. Titicaca. Okay, here we go. So we've seen all the pictures. Let's just read. Check, 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 check. Okay, we're off and running. Let me make sure that level is up. They were all built of hewn stone and had doors and windows with posts, sills, and thresholds of stone, the doorways being narrower above than below. On the island of Koti, there are remarkable ruins. The largest building here is also described as a palace or temple, although it may have been something else. It was not high, but very large in extent. It stood around three sides of a parallelogram with some peculiarities of construction connected with the ends or wings. Making allowance for the absence of the pyramidal foundations, it has more resemblance to some of the great constructions in Central America than to anything peculiar to the later period of Peruvian architecture. Another ruin on this island is shown in Figure 54. The antiquities on the island and shores of this lake need to be more completely explored and described, and probably interesting discoveries could be made at some points by means of well directed excavations. A few miles from Lake Titicaca at Tiwanaku are ruins which were very imposing when first seen by the Spaniards in the time of Pizarro. It is usual to speak of them as the oldest ruins in Peru, which may or may not be correct. They must, however, be classed with those at the lake. Not much now remains of the edifices, which were in very ruinous condition 340 years ago. They were described by Ciesa. Siaka. Let me just go back to the proper thing. I'm going to screen that up a bit. Oops, too far. H. That should be good. Yeah, that should be good right there. I'm just going to check with my assistant on that one. Yes. De Leon. Ciesa de Leon. They were described. Ciesa de Leon. Yeah, de Leon. Ciesa de Leon. Okay, that's good news. Got it right. Morning, Cody. They were described by Ciesa de Leon, who accompanied Pizarro, and also by Diego Dalcobaca. Dalcobaca. Let me check that one too. Alcobaca. Alcobasa. Dalcobasa. All right. Okay. Okay, here we go. They were described by Ciesa de Leon, who accompanied Pizarro, and also by Diego Dalcobasa. Ciesa de Leon mentions great edifices that were in ruins, an artificial hill raised on a groundwork of stone, and two stone idols resembling the human figure and apparently made by skillful artificers. These idols were great statues, 10 or 12 feet high. One of them, which was carried by La Paz in 1842, measured 3.5 yards in length. Sculptured decorations appeared on them, and according to Ciesa de Leon, the figures seemed to be clothed in long vestments, different from those worn in the time of the Incas. Of a very remarkable edifice whose foundations could be traced near these statues, nothing remained then but a well built wall which must have been there for ages, the stones being very much worn and crumbled. Ciesa de Leon's description goes on as follows. In this place also there are stones so large and so overgrown that our wonder is incited, it being incomprehensible how the power of man could have placed them where we see them. They are variously wrought, and some of them, having the form of men, must have been idols. Near the walls are many caves and excavations under the earth, but in another place farther west are other and greater monuments, such as large gateways with hinges, platforms, and porches, each made of a single stone. It surprised me to see these enormous gateways made of great masses of stone, some of which were 30 feet long, 15 high, and 6 thick. Many of the stone monuments at Tiwanaku have been removed, some for building, some for other purposes. In one case, large masses of sculptured stone, 10 yards in length and 6 in width, were used to make grinding stones for a chocolate mill. The principal monuments now seen on this field of ruins are a vast mound covering several acres, where there seems to have been a great edifice, fragments of columns, erect slabs of stone which formed parts of buildings, and several of the monolithic gateways, the largest of which was made of a single stone 10 feet high and 13 broad. Hey, Sati, welcome back. Figure 55. There's figure 55, the monolithic gateway at Tiwanaku. Oh, what is going on here? All right, well, that worked. Well, how come it didn't pop me back to page 142? Sati missed the rigmarole with me scrolling around in the PDF for about 10 minutes. Figure 55 gives a view of one. The doorway is 6 feet 4 inches high and 3 feet 2 inches wide. Above it, along the whole length of the stone, which is now broken, is a cornice covered with sculptured figures. The whole neighborhood, says Mr. Squire, is strewn with immense blocks of stone elaborately wrought, equaling, if not surpassing in size, any known to exist in Egypt or India. At Cusco, 2 or more degrees north of Lake Titicaca, there are ruins of buildings that were occupied until the rule of the Incas was overthrown. Remains of the old structures are seen in various parts of the present town, some of them incorporated into new edifices built by the Spaniards. Cyclopean remains of the walls of the Temple of the Sun now constitute a portion of the convent of St. Domingo. In the days of the Incas, this temple stood a circuit of more than 400 paces and was surrounded by a great wall built of cut stone. Remains of the old fortifications are seen, and there is an extensive ruin here which shows what is supposed to be all that remains of the palace of the Incas. There's 56. All right. Figures 56 and 57 give views of remains of the ancient fortress walls at Cuzco. All right, now it's hard not to try and see that. Damn it. Oh, I shouldn't have done it. All right, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have played around with it. Where am I? Almost there. It didn't go far enough. Oh, and then it bounced me back. Unbelievable. I really do want to see those though, because that's to me, it's one of the most important. It's probably going to be one of the most important ones to see what they knew in the 1800, what they were talking about in the 1800s. So here it is. Wow. So end view of fortress walls at Cusco. I'm assuming that might be some of the Cyclopean ones in there. All right, let's see if I can get back to this without taking 5 minutes. All right, here we go. Back to there. Okay. Occasionally, there is a search at Cusco by means of excavation for antiquities. Within a few years, an important discovery has been made. A lunar calendar of the Incas made of gold has been exhumed. At first, it was described as a gold breastplate or sun. But William Bollert, who gives an account of it, finds that it is a calendar and first discovered in Peru. Many others probably went to the melting pot at the time of the conquest. This is not quite circular. The outer ring is 5 inches and 3/10 in diameter, and the inner 4 inches. It was made to be fastened to the breast of an Inca or priest. The figures were stamped on it, and there seemed to be 24 compartments, large and small, including 3 at the top. At the bottom are 2 spaces. Figures may be or Figures may or may not have been there, but it looks as if they had been worn away. It was found about the year 1859. The uniform and constant report of Peruvian tradition places the beginning of this old civilization in the valley of Cusco, near Lake Titicaca. There appeared the first civilizers and the first civilized communities. There appeared, not there appeared. There appeared the first civilizers and the first civilized communities. This beautiful valley is the most elevated tableland on the continent, Lake Titicaca being 12,846 feet above the sea level. Were it not within the tropics, it would be a region of eternal snow, for it is more than 4,000 feet higher than the beginning of perpetual snow on Mont Blanc. Near it are some of the higher peaks of the Andes, among them Cerrato, Illimani, Illimani, Illimani. Near it are Near it are some of the higher peaks of the Andes, among them Cerrato, Illimani, and Sahama. The ancient other ruins in Peru. The ancient Peru, conquered and robbed by Pizarro, is now divided into Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, and Chile, as far down as the 37th degree of south latitude. Its remains are found to some extent in all these countries, although most abundantly in Peru. The ruins known as the Palaces of Grand Chimu are situated in the northwestern part of Peru near Trujillo. 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 I'm going to leave that. Here, in the time of the first Incas, was an independent state, which was subjugated by the Incas set down in the list of Montesinos as the grandfather of Huayna Capac, about a century before the Spaniards arrived. For what is known of these ruins, we are chiefly indebted to Marino Rivero, director of the National Museum at Lima. They cover a space of 3/4 of a league without including the walled squares found on every side. The chief objects of interest are the remains of 2 great edifices called palaces. These palaces are immense areas surrounded by high walls of brick, the walls being now 10 or 12 yards high and 6 feet thick at the base. There was in each case another wall exterior to this. Within the palace walls were squares and dwellings with narrow passages between them, and the walls are decorated. In the largest palace are the remains of a great reservoir for water, which was brought to it by subterranean aqueducts from the river Moca, 2 miles distant. Outside the enclosures of these palaces are remains of a vast number of buildings, which indicate that the city contained a great population. The Spaniards took vast quantities of gold from the huacas or tombs at this place. The amount taken from a single tomb in the year 1566 and 1592 was officially estimated at nearly $1 million. Figure 58 presents an end view of the walls at Grand Chimu. Figures 59 and 60 represent some of the decorations at Chimu Kanchu. There's the figures. Wow, pretty immense. Interesting. Okay, Sul. I got to just double check with that one on the pronunciation of that one. Cuelap. Cool. I can't even guess that. Silap? Suilap? Calap? Cuelap. Cuelap. Remarkable ruins exist at Cuelap in northern Peru. They consist of a wall of wrought stones 3,600 feet long, 560 broad, and 150 high, constituting a solid mass with a level summit. Probably the interior was made of earth. On this mass was another 600 feet long, 500 broad, and about 150 high. In this and also in the lower structure, there are many rooms made of wrought stone, in which are a great number of niches or cells 1 or 2 yards deep, which were used as tombs. Other old structures exist in that neighborhood. Farther south at Huanacu El Viejo, or Old Huanacu, are 2 peculiar edifices and a terrace, and near them the faded terraces of a large town. The 2 edifices were built of a composition of pebbles and clay faced with hewn stone. One of them is called the Lookout, but it is impossible to discover the purpose for which it was built. The interior of the other is crossed by 6 walls, in each of which is a gateway, the outer one being finely finished and showing a sculptured animal on each of the upper corners. It has a large court and rooms made of cut stones. Connected with this structure was a well-built aqueduct. Figures 61 and 62 give views of the so-called palace and its ground plan. Figures 63 represents the lookout. Figure 63 represents the lookout. So there's the lookout at the bottom. That's a pretty cool sketch. Pretty clean. And that's the plan view from up top. And that one, I'm just going to look. I'm not going to try and... That's the edifice with gateway at Old Huanacu. Huanacu. Wow. That looks so cool. Imagine being there when they first discovered it. Ruins at Pachacamac. All right, is that it? I'm going all the way down now. Yeah, let's see here. Okay, there we go. I'm going to have to figure out Pachacamac. I'm going to have to just check. I don't think I checked that one previously. Pachacamac. See what they say on that one. See what my assistant says. Pachacamac. Chavin de Huanta. Maybe I should check that one too while I'm here. Chavin de Huanta. Got my assistant working overtime here. What? Did it stop? Did I stop it halfway through the search? Come on, buddy. Finish it off. Chavin de Huanta. Yeah. Regenerates. See if that works. Not that one. Pachacamac. Yeah, Pachacamac. All right. Well, I'm getting it. And the other one was... What? Did it disappear? What? Shavin. Okay. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. 7 leagues from Lima near the sea are the much dilapidated ruins shown in Figure 64 of a large city of the Incas, which was built chiefly of adobes or sun dried bricks. It is called Pachacamac. Ruins of towns, castles, fortresses, and other structures are found all about the country. At one place near Chavin de Huanta, there are remarkable ruins which are very old. The material used here was like that seen at Old Huanacu. From the interior of one of the great buildings, there is a subterranean passage which, it is said, goes under the river to the opposite bank. Very ancient ruins showing remains of large and remarkable edifices were seen near Huamanga and described by Ciesa de Leon. The native traditions said this city was built by bearded white men who came there long before the time of the Incas and established a settlement. It is noticed everywhere that the ancient Peruvians made large use of aqueducts, which they built with notable skill, using hewn stones and cement and making them very substantial. Some of them are still in use. They were used to carry water to the cities and to irrigate the cultivated lands. A few of them were very long. There is mention of one which was 150 miles long and of another which was extended 450 miles across sierras and over rivers from south to north. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to keep going here for a bit. Wow. My my metal cup was making a squeaking noise. The great Peruvian roads. Nothing in ancient Peru was more remarkable than the public roads. No ancient people has left traces of works more astonishing than these, so vast was their extent, and so great the skill and labor required to construct them. One of these roads ran along the mountains through the whole length of the empire, from Quito to Chile. Another started from this at Cuzco. Another, starting from this at Cuzco, went down to the coast and extended northward to the equator. These roads were built on beds or deep under structures of masonry. The width of the roadways varied from 20 to 25 feet, and they were made level and smooth by paving and in some places by a sort of metamizing. 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 They were made level. I'm going to redo that sentence. The width of the metamizing. The width of the roadways varied from 20 to 25 feet, and they were made level and smooth by paving, and in some places by a sort of metamizing with pulverized stone mixed with lime and bituminous cement. This cement was used in all the masonry. On each side of the roadway was a very strong wall, more than a fathom in thickness. These roads went over marshes, rivers, and great chasms of the Sierras, and through rocky precipices and mountain sides. The great road passing along the mountains was a marvelous work. In many places, its way was cut through rock for leagues. Great ravines were filled up with solid masonry. Rivers were crossed by means of a curious kind of suspension bridge, and no obstruction was encountered which the builders did not overcome. The builders of our Pacific Railroad, with their superior engineering skill and mechanical appliances, might reasonably shrink from the cost and the difficulties of such a work as this. Extending from 1 degree north of Quito to Cusco, and from Cusco to Chile, it was quite as long as the two Pacific railroads, and its wild route among the mountains was far more difficult. Sarmiento, describing it, said, "It seems to me that if the Emperor, Charles V, would see fit to order the construction of another road like that which leads from Quito to Cusco, or that which from Cusco goes toward Chile, I certainly think he would not be able to make it with all his power." Humboldt examined some of the remains of this road and described as follows a portion of it seen in a pass of the Andes between Mansi and Loza. Our eyes rested continually on superb remains of a paved road of the Incas, the roadway paved with well-cut, dark, porphyritic, porphyritic, the roadway paved, the roadway, paved with well-cut, dark, porphyritic stone, was 20 feet wide and rested on deep foundations. This road was marvelous. None of the Roman roads I have seen in Italy, in the south of France, or in Spain appeared to me more imposing than this work of the ancient Peruvians. He saw remains of several other shorter roads which were built in the same way, some of them between Losa and the river Amazon. Along these roads, at equal distances, were edifices, a kind of caravanserais built of hewn stone for the accommodation of travelers. These great works were described by every Spanish writer on Peru, and in some accounts of them we find suggestions in regard to their history. Check, check, check. Check, check. They are called roads of the Incas, but they were probably much older than the time of these rulers. The mountain road running from Quito was much older than the Inca Huayna Capac, to whom it has sometimes been attributed. It is stated that when he started by this route to invade the Quitas, the road was so bad that he found great difficulties in the passage. It was then an old road, much out of repair, and he immediately ordered the necessary reconstructions. Gomara says, Huayna Capac restored, enlarged, and completed these roads, but he did not build them as some pretend. These great artificial highways were broken up and made useless at the time of the conquest, and the subsequent barbarous rule of the Spaniards allowed them to go to decay. Now only broken remains of them exist to show their former character. The Peruvian civilization. I have to get comfortable here. Check, check, check. The Peruvian civilization. The development of civilization in Peru was very different from that in Mexico and Central America. In both regions, the people were sun worshippers, but their religious organizations, as well as their methods of building temples, were unlike. Neither of these peoples seems to have borrowed from the other. It may be that all the old American civilizations had a common origin in South America, and that all the ancient Americas whose civilization can be traced in remains found north of the isthmus came originally from that part of the continent. This hypothesis appears to me more probable than any other I have heard suggested. But, assuming this to be true, the first migration of civilized people from South America must have taken place at a very distant period in the past, for it preceded not only the history indicated by the existing antiquities, but also an earlier history during which I'm gonna cheat that. During which the Peruvians and Central Americans grew to be as different from their ancestors as from each other. In each case, the development of civilization represented by existing monuments, so far as we can study it, appears to have been original. In some respects, the Peruvian civilization was developed to such a degree as challenged admiration. The Peruvians were highly skilled in agriculture and in some kinds of manufactures. No people ever had a more efficient system of industry. This created their wealth and made possible their great public works. All accounts of the country at the time of the conquest agree in the statement that they cultivated the soil in a very admirable way and with remarkable success, using aqueducts for irrigation and employing guano as one of their most important fertilizers. Europeans learned from them the value of this fertilizer, and its name guano is Peruvian. The remains of their works show what they were as builders. Their skill in cutting stone and their wonderful masonry can be seen and admired by modern builders in what is left of their aqueducts, their roads, their temples, and their other great edifices. They had great proficiency in the arts of spinning, weaving, and dyeing. For their cloth, they used cotton and the wool of four varieties of the llama, that of the vicuna being the finest. Some of their cloth had interwoven designs and ornaments very skillfully executed. Many of their fabrics had rare excellence in the eyes of the Spaniards. Garcilaso says, the coverings of the beds were blankets and friezes of the wool of the vicuna, which is so fine and so much prized that, among other precious things from that land, they had been brought for the bed of Don Philip II. Of their dyes, this account is given in the work of Rivero and von Tschudi. They possess the secret of fixing the dye of all colors, flesh color, yellow, gray, blue, green, black, etc., so firmly in the thread or in the cloth already woven that they never faded during the lapse of ages, even when exposed to the air or buried in tombs underground. Only the cotton became slightly discolored, while the woolen fabrics preserved their primitive luster. It is a circumstance worth remarking that chemical analysis made of pieces of cloth of all the different dyes prove that the Peruvians extracted all their color from the vegetable and none from the mineral kingdom. In fact, the natives of the Peruvian mountains now use plants unknown to Europeans, producing from them bright and lasting colors. They had great skill in the art of working metals, especially gold and silver. Besides these precious metals, they had copper, tin, lead, and quicksilver. Figures 65 and 66 show some of the implements used by the Peruvians. Iron was unknown to them in the time of the Incas, although some maintain that they had it in the previous ages to which belong the ruins at Lake Titicaca. Iron ore was and still is very abundant in Peru. It is impossible to conceive how the Peruvians were able to cut and work stone in such a masterly way, or to construct their great roads and aqueducts without the use of iron tools. Ah, see, they knew about these mysteries back then. Some of the languages of the country, and perhaps all, had names for iron. In official Peruvian, it was called quile, and in the old Chilean tongue, panilec. It is remarkable, observes Molina, that iron, which has been thought unknown to the ancient Americans, has particular names in some of their tongues. It is not easy to understand why they had names for this metal if they never at any time had knowledge of the metal itself. In the Mercurio Peruano, Peruano. So here I'll just stop while I'm uh, editing this here. There's the copper knives and copper tweezers. Well, that's cool. How's my record level? Oh, 33. Okay, let's try and get comfortable here for the last stretch. In the Mercurio, check. In the Mercurio Peruano tome, in the Mercurio Peruano tome 1, page 201, 1791, it is stated that anciently the Peruvian sovereigns worked magnificent iron mines at Anacorremes on the west shore of Lake Titicaca. But I cannot give the evidence used in support of this statement. Their goldsmiths and silversmiths had attained very great proficiency. They could melt the metals in furnaces, cast them in molds made of clay and gypsum, hammer their work with remarkable dexterity, inlay it, and solder it with great perfection. The gold and silver work of these artists was extremely abundant in the country at the time of the conquest, but Spanish greed had it all melted for coinage. It was with articles of this gold work that the Inca Atahualpa filled a room in this vain endeavor to purchase release from captivity. One of the old chroniclers mentions statuary, jars, vases, and every species of vessels, all of fine gold, describing. Thanks, Cody. You make me blush. Trying to get this mic in a more comfortable spot here. All right, I'm gonna have to go back. I don't want to play around too much with it. Describing. This is fascinating, actually. I like this book. I'm enjoying this book. All right, here we go. Describing one of the palaces, he said, they had an artificial garden, the soil of which was made of small pieces of fine gold. And this was artificially sowed with different kinds of maize, which were of gold, their stems, leaves, and ears. Besides this, they had more than 20 sheep, llamas, with their lambs, attended by shepherds, all made of gold. This may be the same artificial garden which was mentioned by Francisco Lopez de Gomara, who places it on an island near Puna. Similar gardens of gold are mentioned by others. It is believed that a large quantity of Peruvian gold work was thrown into Lake Titicaca to keep it from the Spanish robbers. In a description, excuse me. Oh no, this is going too far down. Something's going on with the record levels. Thanks, guys. In a description of one of the golden articles sent to Spain in 1534 by Pizarro, there is mention of 4 llamas, 10 statues of women of full size, and a cistern of gold so curious that it incited the wonder of all. Nothing is more constantly mentioned by the old Spanish chroniclers than the vast abundance of gold in Peru. It was more common than any other metal. Temples and palaces were covered with it, and it was very beautifully wrought into ornaments, temple furniture, articles for household use, and imitations of almost every object in nature. In the course of 25 years after the conquest, the Spaniards sent from Peru to Spain more than 400 million ducats, $800 million worth of gold, all or nearly all of it having been taken from the subjugated Peruvians as booty. Figures 67 and 68 show a golden and silver vase reduced from the actual size. I'll just stop there, take a quick breath. This record level keeps dropping for some reason, but there's the vases of silver and golden vases. Wow. Awesome. This is fascinating. Dumping gold in Lake Titicaca. I mean, has anybody looked for that gold? Loving this book. Masonry is kind of my thing, so I might be biased, but I've worked with Peruvians, hardworking people, talented and nicest people you'll ever meet. Yeah, Cody, I agree. Thanks, man. I mean, I think that's why Masonry is so fascinating because they must have looked at these old cyclopean works and thought, who the hell made these and how did they make them? And I think that's part of the reason why Masonry has such an esoteric history and mystery to it. Actual size. All right, let's continue on here. I wasn't gonna do this much of this chapter. I don't know if I can finish this chapter, but we'll keep going. Figure 69 and 70 represent various articles of pottery. All these illustrations are copies from articles taken from old Peruvian tombs. The most perfectly manufactured articles of Peruvian pottery were used in the tombs. Some of those made for other uses are very, there's that E instead of a C. Curious. Some of those made for other uses were very curious. A considerable number of articles made for common use have been preserved. Mariano Rivero, a Peruvian, says, at this day there exist in many houses piters, large jaws, and earthen pots of this manufacture, which are preferred for their solidity to those manufactured by our own potters. The ancient Peruvians were inferior to the Central Americans in the arts of ornamentation and sculpture. Science among the Peruvians was not very highly developed, but engineering skill of some kind is indicated by the great roads and aqueducts. I'll just stop there. I'm not going to turn this to its side, but you can see the articles of pottery there. Pretty cool. Check, check. Their knowledge of the art of preparing colors and certain useful medicines implied a study of plants. Their progress in astronomy was not equal to that found in Central America. Nevertheless, they had an. Got to redo that guy quickly. Scroll up while I can. Nevertheless, they had an accurate measure of the solar year, but unlike the Central Americans, they divided the year into 12 months, and they used mechanical contrivances successfully to fix the times of the solstices and equinoxes. A class of men called Amuatas was trained to preserve and teach whatever knowledge existed in the country. It was their business to understand the quipas. There's a couple more articles of pottery there. Nevertheless, whoops. It was their business to understand the quipas, keep in memory the historical poems, give attention to the science and practice of medicine, and train their pupils in knowledge. These were not priests. They were the learned men of Peru, and the government allowed them every facility for study and for communicating instruction. How much they knew of astronomy, it is not easy to say. They had knowledge of some of the planets, and it is claimed that there is some reason to believe they used aids to eyesight in studying the heavens, such as some suppose were used by our mound builders. A discovery made in Bolivia a few years since is cited in support of this belief. It is the figure of a man in the act of using a tube to aid vision, which was taken from an ancient tomb. Mr. David Forbes, an English chemist and geologist, obtained it in Bolivia and carried it to England in 1864. William Bollert describes it as follows in a paper read to the London Anthropological Society. It is a nude figure of silver 2.5 inches in height on a flat pointed pedestal. In the right hand it has the mask of a human face, but in the left a tube over 1/2 inch in length, the narrow part placed to the left eye in a diagonal position, as if observing some celestial object. This is the first specimen of a figure in the act of looking through a hollow tube directed to the heavens that has been found in the New World. We cannot suppose the Peruvians had anything that more nearly resemble a telescope. It was found in Chulpa, or ancient Indian tomb, Coronoko, Corocoro, Kagwin. Okay, I got to check with my assistant on that one. Or ancient Indian tomb. I'm going to try going back to here. It was found Chupa. In a Chupa. Okay, let's just check here before. Kawingora. Queen Gora. Kaquin Gora. Kaquin Gora. Coro. Is there anything else on here while I'm waiting for my assistant to tell me how to pronounce this? Quipu. Just going to see how far. Oh, yeah, we're almost done. We're going to finish off this whole chapter here. This is great. He's saying Cajamarca. No, it's not even close. They don't recognize this word at all. Kanyari. Kakingora. All right, sorry about that. I'm going to keep going here, 3 more pages. It was found in a chulpa, or ancient Indian tomb, at Kakingara, near Korokoro, latitude 17 degree 15 seconds south, and longitude 68 degree 35. Actually, that's probably minutes, not seconds, right? I better redo that. Cody, do you know if 1 dash is seconds or minutes? Or minute? No, it's minutes, I think. Latitude and longitude. Latitude. Okay, I better redo that quickly. Latitude. Yeah. Latitude 17 degree 15 minutes south and longitude 68 degree 35 minutes west in Bolivia. He forgets the astronomical monument described by Captain Dupay. The art of writing in alphabetical characters, so far as appears, was unknown to the Peruvians in the time of the Incas. No Peruvian books existed at that time, and no inscriptions have been found in any of the ruins. They had a method of recording events, keeping accounts, and making reports to the government by means of the quipu. This was made of cords of twisted wood fastened to a base prepared for the purpose. These cords were of various sizes and colors, and every size and color had its meaning. The record was made by means of an elaborate system of knots and artificial intertwinings. The record um, Amatus. Let me just check that quickly. Amautus. Yeah, Amautus. That's good. I think I'm getting better at this. The Amautas were carefully educated to the business of understanding and using the quipas, and this science was so much perfected that those skilled in it attained the art of recording historical events, laws, and decrees, so as to transmit to their descendants the most striking events of the empire. Thus, the quipas could supply the place of documents. Each quipu was a book full of information for those who could read it. Among the Amantus, memory was educated to retain and transmit to posterity songs, historical narratives, and long historical poems. It is said also the tragedies and comedies were composed and preserved in this way, and the dramatic performances were among the regular entertainments, encouraged and supported by the Incas. Whether the art of writing ever existed in the country cannot now be determined. Some of the Peruvian tongues had names for paper. The people knew that a kind of paper or parchment could be made of plantain leaves, and according to Montesinos, writing and books were common in the older times, that is to say, in ages long previous to the Incas. He explains how the art was lost, and I shall presently show. It is not improbable that a kind of hieroglyphical writing existed in some of the Peruvian communities, especially among the Amares. Humboldt mentions books of hieroglyphical writing. Hieroglyphical? Humboldt mentions books of hieroglyphical writing found among the Panots on the river Ucayali, which were bundles of their paper resembling our volumes in quarto. A Franciscan missionary found an old man sitting at the foot of a palm tree and reading one of these books to several young persons. The Franciscan was told that the writing contained hidden things which no stranger ought to know. It was seen that the pages of the book were covered with figures of men, animals, and isolated characters deemed hieroglyphical and arranged in lines with order and symmetry. The Panos said these books were transmitted to them by their ancestors and had relation to wanderings and ancient wars. There is similar writing on a prepared llama skin found among other antiquities on a peninsula in Lake Titicaca. which is now in the museum at La Paz, Bolivia. It appears to be a record of atrocities. It appears to be a record of atrocities perpetrated by the Spaniards at the time of the conquest, and shows that some of the Amores could at that time write hieroglyphics. All right, that's that one. That's that one. Tomorrow is ancient chapter 11. We're getting towards the end. I think there's just this and then a conclusion chapter and some appendix. I don't know if I'll have to narrate those or not, but yeah, this has been a fun book to read. I'm glad Darren found it in our miscellaneous folder. So Peruvian ancient history next. Yeah, thanks for checking it out. And thank you, Cody, for that. I was right. I guessed the minutes. Awesome. Yeah, I guess we'll see you tomorrow. If you want to just support our show, we got all our stuff out on Audible and Spotify, but also this YouTube channel as well. Share it out, like it, subscribe. Hopefully, we're going to keep this thing growing a little bit. We have potential with this channel, but you can see all the rest of the live stuff in there. And Darren's been doing some great videos of the audio with the word scrolling and stuff like that for people. So thanks. Love you all and see you tomorrow.